Hello, all you lovely podcast listeners. This is Laura. Would you help me kick off this holiday season with a few of your good vibrations? Here at the Laura Flanders Show, we rely on you. We think of you as our hive of listeners to buzz about the program. How, you might ask? Well, you can follow us and our featured guests on social media and like and share our posts with your friends and family. You can hit the subscribe button for this podcast if you haven't already. And if you've subscribed via Apple Podcasts, please rate us and write a review if you like the show. Finally, you can join me every week to watch the premiere on YouTube and chat with me in real time. Simply subscribe on YouTube by clicking that bell button. I'd love to hear from you. That's Sundays, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. And don't forget, our hive depends on a bigger hive. That hive of local community radio and public television stations, the ones that are carrying this show. If they're not carrying it, you can write a post or direct message to them via social media to ask them to think about it, and tag us at The LF Show. At our website, you'll find a list of all the stations that are already carrying the program, and you can find the one closest to you by simply searching using your zip code. That's all at lauraflanders.org. Thanks in advance to all you busy bees for buzzing about the program and helping us grow. Now, here's this week's show. Hi, I'm Laura, and this is the Laura Flanders Show, a TV and radio program that shines a light on the solutions of tomorrow today. We report on the people and movements driving systemic change from the worlds of politics, arts, and entrepreneurship. Welcome. When it came to the midterm elections, mainstream media, pundits, pollsters, and politicos got a whole lot wrong that local Black, Brown, and BIPOC-owned media got right. And the commercial media are still missing many important stories. That's the message from this week's episode. It's our roundtable of journalists that we call Meet the BIPOC Press, a monthly feature of the Laura Flanders Show. What do the money media's hits and misses tell us about what journalists need to be doing better or differently in the weeks and months ahead? For this conversation, I was joined by Mitra Kalita, the publisher of Epicenter-NYC. She's the co-founder of URL Media, a network of Black and Brown-owned community media outlets that partners with the Laura Flanders Show every month. Habib Rahman, the co-founder of TBN24, the first Bangladeshi 24/7 live television channel in the U.S., and Stephanie Williams, the executive editor of the IE Voice and Black Voice News, serving Southern California's Inner Empire region. How did their outlets meet the needs of their constituents and local voters? Some of the answers are pretty surprising. Here's Meet the BIPOC Press. I want to welcome you all to the program. Mitra, coming to you in New York, a lot of people were surprised by the outcome. Governor Hochul, the Democrat, hung on, but 5 Republicans won in the House. Now, you and your reporter Felipe de la Hoz at Epicenter perhaps weren't so surprised. You'd been doing reporting on the rise of MAGA New Yorkers for weeks, maybe months. Can you talk about that?
Felipe, as you mentioned, on October 13th, did a story about the MAGA forces of New York. And I think for mainstream media, I hadn't yet seen that story, saying in New York, including New York City and South Brooklyn, Staten Island, but also parts of Queens, this polarization is starting to pervade our local politics in a way that we actually didn't see for the last few years. So guess what? Even without Donald Trump in the White House, we're seeing major effects of deep partisanship. October 13th, Epicenter does this story saying these are the forces. October 18th comes the Quinnipiac poll saying Zeldin and Kathy Hochul are neck and neck. And sure enough, the reasons for that are what I'm outlining. Obviously, Governor Hochul made it through, but I do think it goes way beyond the governorship, to your point, right? That the map of New York between a combination of redistricting, but also these forces has been altered in a way that I think a lot of blue states and blue cities, while there was not a red wave in this election, I think blue states and blue cities cannot afford to be complacent at all.
Well, that takes us directly to Los Angeles. And coming to you, Stephanie, you have Republican Rick Caruso against Democrat Karen Bass.
Karen Bass is going to hang on and prevail. but it should not have been a struggle, the struggle that it was. I had really assumed she would be declared victorious on election night. So that was surprising.
I mean, whatever way the voters vote, we're talking about media coverage and media assumptions. And I guess my question to you, Stephanie, from your vantage point, why do you think much of the media got this so wrong?
We've seen it again and again, and yet the media kind of just, the polls say this, and there's a tendency to just follow along. And yet, and also I think if we're kind of looking within our own communities, we should be reading the pulse of what's happening here. And if it's contrary to the polls, we should use our voices and speak up and say, that's not what we're seeing in my community, regardless of what the polls say. If we can use our publications to raise awareness around that issue, to educate around the issues that are important to our community on the ballot, and to get local leaders in our communities to share their voices on those issues, I think that helps to drive turnout. And sometimes you can't necessarily do that in straight reporting, because we should, present both sides, but we can use our opinion columns to be a megaphone for some of that information.
As you have very well, beautifully in your publication. Coming to this question of misinformation and looking at or taking the pulse, not the polls. I love that. There were all those pollsters and pundits out there predicting that red wave. They said that they were surprised on election night. Were you? You want to start? Habib, how about you?
Good question, because everywhere you looked right before the election, leading up to the election, from going back in August, September, and the pollsters were saying, especially 538, 270 to win, and you have Politico, New York Times predicting and showing numbers that say, hey, the House is gone. It's a foregone conclusion. Forget about that. Now the Senate is also gone. And historically, it backed their numbers, because that's exactly what happens in the midterms, especially the sitting president when he is not doing well. His approval is lower than 44%. He is not doing well, except for 1998 and 2002. When 2002 is a different story, because Bush had the 9/11 Iraq War. The country was in a different atmosphere than what we see today. Today, we have this polarized situation. We are up in arms, whether you're left or right. This is the situation. Now, from community perspective, in the community television, black and brown, and not white, non-white, new immigrant communities perspective, it is difficult to understand and grasp that situation and numbers and question what is happening. And then you have this disinformation, misinformation, and constantly feeding the wrong information, and providing and you're doing it over and over. By doing so, you are actually establishing non-facts as facts. Take Donald Trump for an example. And this actually creates doubt in voters' minds. So from our perspective, journalism perspective, we have to step in and get involved in the community and ask questions. What do you think? And then surprisingly, we had Bangladeshi Americans who are supporting Trump and saying he is one of the best presidents.
Mitra, again, you and Felipe were sounding an alarm about disinformation, particularly in Spanish language media and in Spanish language social media. Again, like a huge story. Why didn't this come up?
There's such a difference between, I think, how largely white media is consuming, and kind of the both sidesism of our press tends to have us focus on Fox News as the misinformation, versus very pervasive, constant WhatsApp messages that are, and I use WhatsApp as, it's also Facebook, of course, it's Twitter, it's direct text messages among communities. I mean, it really is truly pervasive. It's also very global. And I think that the way we cover elections is probably when America gets its most parochial, right? And that is a mistake. Habib mentioned 9/11 and the period after 9/11 in terms of affecting politics. I don't think our media caught up to the global forces that actually use a lot of the same tactics to misinform and disrupt communities. So we've been doing a lot of stories around misinformation. Eyes wide open, stories about misinformation tend to perform, just from a metrics perspective, who's reading them, less well than the stories perpetuating misinformation. And so we received a grant from American Press Institute for the URL Media Network to better cover midterm elections. And so while we're focused on misinformation, we're also equally focused on what are we encouraging voters to vote for, right? What are the issues that they have control over at the ballots? What are the local issues? I mean, we got a lot of questions about climate change, abortion, for example. How do you, as you're combating misinformation, still provide good information? Because one of the massive disconnects is mainstream media is covering misinformation and they're covering the polls. Right. They're not really covering abortion, climate change, your garbage pickup, your kids' PTA. I mean, these are the stories that I think all three of us have been mired in for the last few months.
Especially, of course, that question of crime. And I encourage people to look at some of the reporting you all did, contrasting the actual declining rates of murder, for example, in New York City, with the increasing rates of coverage of the topic, something that clearly affected the electorate both in the LA area and in New York and other places alongside. Habib, coming to you, was that a big topic in your reporting?
Yes, absolutely. They are no different from white folks or black folks. Once you are here, you are here. What happens on the street, it will affect you. Yes, you are at the bottom of the food chain. I understand that, but it will end up affecting you. It's just a matter of time. And the other thing we really was focusing on that there are certain things that, civic engagement that you need to really take part in. And the least part of the civic engagement is to take part in the vote. If you think you picked the wrong guy last time during the primary, pick the person who you believe reflects your ideas. You believe that they will do things that they will do that affects you and your community, and vote the other person out. Voters are the boss. They get to decide who gets the primary, especially in New York.
I could imagine that's a powerful message, particularly to populations that in the mainstream media are cast as having so little power. So even just sending that message of you have power in this moment and you can cast a vote seems really important.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. You're listening to our Meet the BIPOC Press Media Roundtable, which happens here on the Laura Flanders Show every month. Mitra Kalita is joining me this time. She is co-founder and publisher of Epicenter-NYC, a grassroots newsletter based in Queens, New York, and the co-founder of URL. URL is a network of media that's owned and operated by people of color. Our guests this month are Habib Rahman, co-founder of TBN24, a Bangladeshi 24/7 global TV channel based in Queens, and Stephanie Williams, executive editor of IE Voice and Black Voice News, which serve the Inner Empire region of Southern California. We're talking about how the media fared in covering the midterms and where they missed the mark in serving the critical information needs of communities of color. You can find more Meet the BIPOC Press Media Roundtable discussions in our archives at lauraflanders.org. Did you know you can watch the show on our YouTube channel or on over 300 public television stations around the country? These media networks are critical to our democracy, but technically owned by listeners and viewers like you. As the season of good cheer and Thanksgiving is on us, please consider becoming a supporter of your local community station, be it radio or TV. You can find a list of those that carry
carry this show through a handy-dandy search mechanism using your zip code at our website. That's lauraflanders.org. And while you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter to receive information on all of our streaming events and web exclusives, including the upcoming podcast-only release of the full uncut version of today's conversation. Next, we discuss the power of ballot initiatives and which initiatives stood out around the country. But first, here's Only One Can Win by I Poet Laureate from Syntax, the Terrifics album, Year One.
Live from the podium, looking to stand tall. Seems like endless reams of ruby and blue streams. Beams embedding you with a particular view of things. Scoreboard politics for game show fiends. Aiming to inflame to partisan the between. Graphically obscene electoral data strings. I'm wave election seasick, turning me green. 10 talking heads, attacking their opponents. Candidate by candidate, a straight party ticket. Quibble over exit poll info just to bicker. But all they really want is an I voted today sticker. Was a strange night, sort of the plan. Blumenthal cross chops, Linda McMahon. Reverse drop kick, land from the top buckle. So I'm flip-flopping back to Fox News for good chuckle.
To you, Stephanie, we've talked a bit about candidates. What about the ballot initiatives that were on the ballot there in California and nationwide? Abortion, prison labor, environment, bail reform, all these things were up for votes and got some interesting results, more positive generally towards reform than the media, the white-dominated media, would have had you expect. Anything stand out to you? Perhaps focusing on the reproductive justice aspect, because California made history in this election.
From a reporting perspective, we started early on, back in March, when we began to start talking about the election and the fact that it was a midterm election. And we did some work around civics, explaining to our readers about the impact that redistricting would have on the election cycle this year. And then we also talked a lot about ballot initiatives, how they're initiated, and the power of the people to move initiatives that maybe they feel the legislature should be advocating for on their behalf, to show the public that they actually have the power to take on these issues and move them forward themselves. So when it came to all of the ballot measures that we had this year, I think almost the abortion issue, to me as a woman, was almost a no-brainer, right? And one of the things that I think got missed that shouldn't have been missed in the polls was the role of young voters in the election and how they came out in 2020 and how they came out again this year, how there were some Republican women that swung over, how independent women swung over. And so it just made it so that the probability of that initiative succeeding seemed almost written in the stars, at least to me. We don't have to wait for legislators, even though we elect them to represent us. The fact that if there's something that we're passionate about as a people, as a community, we can coalesce around that issue and really bring it to reality just by doing the work on the ground and using our platforms, our media platforms, to make that happen. So I think civic engagement around issues, around how propositions work, around how people can make a difference in not only educating themselves, but educating people around them. And we can help do that in terms of how we report. And I think it's not a major shift in how we report, but just making sure that we're not just focusing on the negative, because if you focus on the negative, people hear the negative, right? But if you focus on the positive or the benefits, then that's what people will focus on.
I really think this issue of ballot initiatives and the how-tos of how our network has operated has really struck me that over the last few months, we do the what the ballot initiative means. But here in New York, Epicenter was literally telling voters, flip your ballot over. Like the actual mechanics of voting, we don't separate from the issues. And I just want to pull Habib into the conversation on that note, because I visited his studio a few weeks ago. They were set up for midterms where they had translations of each of the states. And Habib, I don't know if you remember this moment, but we looked at the map and you said here, and you pointed to Michigan, and you said a few thousand Bangladeshis could really change the governor's fortunes, right, for Governor Whitmer. And then you pointed to Buffalo, New York, and you said, and here, this could really change Kathy Hochul's fortunes, and I can reach both of those communities.
I remember that conversation we had, a small network like, us, TVN24, or compared to even URL Media compared to MSNBC or CNN or Fox, we are really minute. But they don't understand the power of local journalism, local stations, and the influence that we have on the local people. We actually have electoral map that we go through, and we say, okay, this is where people need help. The ballot initiative, okay, flip the ballot. What does that really mean? Why should I even flip the ballot, right? Somebody needs to explain that process. So we started reaching out to the voters, small pockets and them, other minorities, including Bangladeshis, and explain to them what's at risk. And for newcomers, it's very difficult. Even people who have been living here for 30, 40 years, it's very difficult to understand the process of electoral voting system of 538, 435, 100 Senate. It's all confusing. So we had to take our time to explain to them. I knew the Michigan, homes of 30 to 40,000 Bangladeshi, and they are in Hamtramck and Warren, Michigan, which is Rashida Tlaib's, their home turf.
We've really tried to be rooted in our coverage, Laura. And so, two headlines that the URL Media Network really didn't run that I saw a lot of mainstream outlets run with was, why is the GOP losing Latinos? And for the most part, while there are the same MAGA forces that we're talking about, Latinos by and large did vote Democratic. The second were, of course, Black males. There was a narrative of, I'll use Georgia as an example to be concrete, is Stacey Abrams losing the Black male vote? And we really didn't do those stories to a little bit of what Stephanie's talking about, that kind of pit communities against each other, but really tried to center the candidates and their narratives, as well as communities and what they're voting for.
Because that did prove out to be a false narrative in both cases, right?
I really appreciate what you've all had to say. And I want to come back to the big picture here, because the point that you just made, Stephanie, is that paying attention to the constituencies that your media cover in the way that you cover is not just doing a favor to those constituencies, but is helping the country as a whole understand itself better. And in each of your cases, I would love you to lift up an example of a story that, had the majority white media got right, we might have seen some different outcomes, or at least some different expectations, and perhaps some different work going in. But starting with you, Mitra.
I would say if I could take two. One is the security at the polls continues to be a great concern among our communities. And so we received about 50 questions in response to our call out across the URL Media Network. We had 7 partners who participated. We received 50 questions. By and large, a lot of those questions were, will I be safe at the polls? How do I know that my vote is being counted? And so picking up on some of the back to basics of how voting works thread, I think that's an area that was not covered enough in the mainstream media. And we continue to do those stories. It's really informing our coverage for 2023 and 2024. The second is the Asian American vote in New York City. The last year, really, for the Asian community has been defined by a climate of fear. Stop Asian Hate is not just a hashtag in our communities. There is real fear. I'll say this as the mother of 2 girls, sending my kids out on the subway and really kind of giving them instructions on where to stand and how to behave and what to do if things go awry is very different from what that was a few years ago. And it's also a repeated message in Asian households like mine. I don't think the mainstream media have figured out how to cover this. I feel personally committed to figuring out how to cover this. In the meantime, we continue to raise these voices and kind of very transparently not separate, again, our communities from the policies that our communities need to be safe.
And Habib, if there was one thing, one lesson you would like the white media, for lack of a better word, to do differently next time?
First, on the white media, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they are focused on what sells. And that's what they focus on. They are really razor sharp, pinpoint goal is to make their media dominant, how to sell their media. And that's their focus. They can care less what's going to happen if the democracy is at stake. Maybe at some point they will be affected, but not at the moment. If you are surprised with the New York, I'm going to tell you, if Democrat had invested little time in high-profile candidates such as Obama or Biden visited Wisconsin, Mandela Byrne would have won that seat. He got no support, no funding, and he came this close.
For me, my one takeaway would be focused on the primary election. And I'm focusing on the primary because here in California, if a candidate gets 50% plus one, then he does not have to stand for a runoff in the November election. And what we have happening here is that for our district attorneys and our county sheriffs, they are both positions are up for election in these off-cycle years. For example, in Riverside County, our district attorney is known nationally because he's led the nation for several years in death penalty sentencing. So he's kind of like the death penalty king. And although he's slowed a little bit in the last year or so, that is how he's known nationally. When it comes to sheriffs, they're the ultimate authority for all police departments in the region. And we have our sheriff here in Riverside County who has come to national prominence. I call him a darling of Fox News because he is was a member of the Oath Keepers, and he was called out for that and had to resign. He was, borderline COVID denier. He was anti-vaxxer, all of those things where people looked to him in a leadership role. He was doing everything opposite of what we needed in communities, particularly in communities of color that were so heavily impacted by COVID. And so the fact that they run in these off-year elections, that they're elected by 12 to 13 to 14% of the population, and we talk about criminal justice, but we never really get to the root of the problem. And so I just would say, if there's anything that I would like to see done differently, it would be for the white media to help us tell that story.
Everything that you all have said here today just affirms my commitment to our Meet the BIPOC Press roundtables. I think it was the Haitian president Aristide in his good days who said that elections aren't democracy. They just take the temperature of our democracy. And your outlets are our temperature takers. We have got to listen more closely and watch more closely what you're reporting. And I deeply appreciate what you did. Habib, Stephanie, appreciate you being here. And Mitra, let's keep it up.
Thank
Thank you.
For more information on this week's show and our guests, check out our episode notes at patreon.com/The LF Show. That post includes links to related articles and past episodes from our archives to explore. It's also where you can find an invitation to watch the premiere of each week's show on our YouTube channel and chat live in real time with me, Sundays, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. The holiday buzz is on us. We give thanks to all of you bees out there who have become a member of our healthy hive. It's your support that makes it possible for this show to air free on public television and radio all across the country. So help us spread the buzz. Go to patreon.com/The LF Show and join our hive by becoming a Patreon partner, or make a one-time donation at lauraflanders.org/donate. Thanks for listening. This show is produced by yours truly, Laura Flanders, along with Sabrina Artel, Nat Needham, David Newman, Rory O'Connor, Alicia Duque, Jeanette Hernandez, and Jeannie Hopper. Major funding for this program is provided by the Novo, Park, Ellen Poss Family, Hisuku Wilson Foundations, the Schumann Media Center, Rising Fund at Tides, Kim Connor and Nick Groombridge, Jane Fonda, and listeners like you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for contributing. Thanks for your ideas. Stay kind. Stay curious. Until the next time, I'm Laura.